The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Chicago when Marcus Cole first saw her. She stood beneath the torn awning of a small bookstore on the corner of Ashland Avenue, her dark hair clinging to her face, her eyes fixed on something no one else could see. The world passed by without noticing her, just another shadow in a city full of them. But Marcus noticed. Something about the way she held herself, proud despite the worn coat wrapped around her shoulders, defiant despite the cold. That made her hands tremble. Marcus was 32 years old, a carpenter by trade, a man who built things with his hands and believed in honest work. He had grown up in the south side of Chicago, raised by a grandmother who taught him that dignity was not something anyone could take from you unless you let them. He carried that lesson with him every day, in the calluses on his palms, in the way he looked people in the eye when he spoke to them. He had stopped at the corner to grab a coffee from the small diner across the street when he saw her. The rain intensified, drumming against the pavement, turning the gutters into small rivers. She did not move, did not seek better shelter. She simply stood there, watching the water cascade from the broken awning, as if waiting for something that would never come. Marcus found himself crossing the street before he made a conscious decision to do so. His boots splashed through puddles, and the rain soaked through his jacket, but he kept walking. When he reached her, she looked up at him with eyes the color of autumn leaves, brown with flecks of gold, and he felt something shift in his chest, a door opening to a room he did not know existed. "You're going to catch a cold standing out here," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Maybe I don't mind the cold." There was something in her voice, a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Marcus had heard that tone before in the voices of people who had been pushed to the margins, who had learned to expect nothing from strangers, except more of the same indifference. "There's a diner across the street," he said, gesturing with his chin. "Hot coffee, warm booths, better than standing in the rain." She looked at the diner, then back at him, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "I don't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's coffee." He shrugged, trying to appear casual, even though his heart was beating faster than it should. "I'm going there anyway. You can join me or not. Your choice." For a long moment she did not respond. The rain continued to fall, indifferent to their small drama. Then, slowly, she nodded. They walked across the street together, and Marcus held the door open for her. The warmth of the diner wrapped around them like a blanket, and she let out a small sigh that she probably did not mean for him to hear. They slid into a booth by the window, and a waitress named Rita, who had known Marcus since he was a teenager, brought them 2 cups of coffee without being asked. "You come here often," the woman said. It was not a question. "Every morning. Rita makes the best coffee in the city. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She wrapped her hands around the cup, absorbing its warmth. "I'm Elena." "Marcus." He extended his hand, and after a brief hesitation, she shook it. Her grip was firm despite her small hand, and her skin was cold but soft. "You're not going to ask me why I was standing in the rain," she said, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise perhaps, or gratitude. "Most people can't help asking questions." "I'm not most people." She almost smiled at that. Almost. It was the shadow of a smile, a ghost of what it might have been under different circumstances. But it was enough to make Marcus want to see the real thing. They talked for an hour, then 2. The rain did not stop, but neither of them seemed to care anymore. Elena spoke carefully, revealing little about herself, but Marcus listened to what she did not say, as much as what she did. She had been living in Chicago for 3 years. She worked at a small flower shop in Wicker Park. She had no family, or at least none she was willing to mention, and she had learned through experiences she did not elaborate on that the world was not kind to women who had nothing to offer but themselves. What she did not tell him, what she kept locked behind those autumn eyes, was the truth that had defined her entire existence. Elena Castellano was the daughter of Victor Castellano, one of the most powerful and feared figures in the Chicago underworld. But she had not spoken to her father in nearly 4 years, had not set foot in the mansion on Lakeshore Drive where she had grown up surrounded by luxury and violence. She had walked away from that life on the night of her 21st birthday, when she discovered exactly what her father's empire was built upon. The money that had paid for her education, her clothes, her every comfort, came from suffering she could not ignore. She had confronted her father, demanded he change, and when he laughed at her naivety, she had packed a single bag and disappeared into the city that had always existed just beyond the walls of her gilded cage. For 4 years, she had built a life from nothing. She rented a small apartment above a laundromat. She worked 6 days a week at the flower shop, learning the names of every bloom, finding peace in the simple act of creating beauty from stems and petals. She had no friends, not really, because friendship required honesty she could not afford. And she had learned to be invisible, to move through the city without drawing attention, because she knew her father's men were always watching, always waiting for her to come back. But she had not expected Marcus Cole, with his kind eyes and work-worn hands, to see her, standing in the rain and simply offer coffee. She had not expected to say yes. As the afternoon faded into evening, Marcus asked if he could see her again. Elena wanted to say no. She should have said no. Every instinct she had developed in 4 years of survival screamed at her to walk away and never look back. But there was something about him, something solid and real, something that made her feel like she could breathe for the first time in years. "Tomorrow," she said. "Same time." She walked out of the diner and into the rain, and Marcus watched her until she disappeared around the corner. He did not know who she was or what she was running from. He did not know that loving her would lead him into a world he could not imagine. All he knew was that he would be at the diner tomorrow and the day after, and every day she would let him. The next morning, Marcus woke before dawn. He lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of the city coming to life outside his window. His apartment was small but clean, furnished with pieces he had built himself. A bookshelf in the corner held his grandmother's Bible and a few photographs, memories of a life that had been simple but full of love. He thought about Eleanor as he showered and dressed. He thought about the way she had looked at him when he offered her coffee, suspicious and hopeful at the same time. He thought about the sadness that seemed to live in her eyes, a sadness he wanted to understand. At 7 o'clock, he walked into the diner. Eleanor was already there, sitting in the same booth, a cup of coffee warming her hands. She looked up when he entered, and this time she smiled. It was small, tentative, but it was real. "You came," she said I would. He slid into the seat across from her. "Did you think I wouldn't? People make a lot of promises they don't keep." "I'm not one of those people." They talked through breakfast, and the conversation flowed more easily than the day before. Elena told him about the flower shop, about the old woman named Mrs. Chen who owned it and treated her like a daughter. Marcus told her about his work, about the houses he had built and restored, about the satisfaction of creating something lasting with his own hands. When the time came for Elena to leave for work, Marcus walked her to the door of the flower shop. The morning sun was breaking through the clouds, casting golden light on the wet streets. Elena turned to face him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For the coffee, for not asking questions." "Can I ask one question?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Can I see you again tonight? Maybe grab dinner?" The fear flickered across her face, quick and bright, but she pushed it down. "There's a small Italian place on Division Street, Giovanni's. 7 o'clock? I'll be there." She disappeared into the flower shop, and Marcus walked to his truck with a smile on his face that he could not have explained to anyone. He spent the day working on a renovation in Lincoln Park, but his mind kept drifting back to Elena. There was something about her that called to him, something broken that he wanted to help mend. What he did not know, what he could not have suspected, was that across the city, in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a man named Victor Castellano was looking at a photograph of Marcus Cole. One of Victor's men had spotted Eleanor the week before, had followed her to the diner, had watched her with the carpenter. Now Victor knew about Marcus, knew where he worked and where he lived, knew everything that could be known about a man who had no secrets. Victor Castellano was 63 years old, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He had built his empire from nothing, had clawed his way up from the streets to become one of the most powerful men in Chicago. He had done terrible things, had made decisions that haunted him in the small hours of the night. But he had done it all for his family, for his wife before she passed, for his daughter who had inherited her mother's beauty and her mother's stubborn heart. When Elena left, it had nearly destroyed him. He had given her everything, had protected her from the ugliness of his world, had tried to give her a life untouched by the violence that surrounded him, and she had thrown it all away because she could not accept who he was. For 4 years, he had watched her from a distance. He had made sure she was safe, had arranged for the apartment above the laundromat to be available when she needed it, had ensured that Mrs. Chen hired her at the flower shop. Eleanor thought she had escaped, thought she had built a life of her own, but every step she had taken had been on a path her father had quietly prepared. Now there was a man, a carpenter from the south side with no connections, no power, nothing to offer except his heart. Victor studied the photograph, memorizing the face of Marcus Cole. He did not know yet what he would do. He only knew that no one entered his daughter's life without his knowledge, and no one would hurt her while he drew breath. Back at the diner, Rita was clearing the table where Marcus and Elena had sat. She had known Marcus since he was a boy, had watched him grow into a good man, the kind of man the world needed more of. She had seen the way he looked at the woman with the autumn eyes, had recognized that look for what it was. "Be careful, Marcus," she whispered, to no one in particular. "That girl's carrying something heavy." The evening arrived, and Marcus stood outside Giovanni's wearing his best shirt, a blue button-down that his grandmother had given him years ago. The restaurant was small and warm, with red checkered tablecloths and candles on every table. Elena was already there when he walked in, sitting in a corner booth, wearing a simple black dress that made her look like she belonged in another world entirely. They ordered pasta and wine, and the conversation turned deeper. Marcus told her about losing his grandmother 3 years ago, about the empty space she had left in his life. Elena listened with an intensity that made him feel truly heard, something he had not experienced in a long time. "She sounds wonderful," Eleanor said when he finished. "She was. She taught me everything that matters. How to work hard, how to treat people right, how to keep going when things get tough." He paused, looking at her across the candlelight. "What about your family?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena's hand tightened on her wineglass, and for a moment Marcus thought she would shut down, would rebuild the walls he had been so carefully trying to lower. "My mother passed when I was 18, she said finally. "Cancer. It happened fast. One day she was there and then she wasn't. I'm sorry. And my father..." She trailed off, her eyes distant. "My father is complicated. We don't speak anymore." Marcus wanted to ask more, wanted to understand what had driven such a rift between them. But he remembered his promise not to push, not to ask questions she was not ready to answer. So instead, he reached across the table and took her hand. "Whatever happened, you don't have to carry it alone." Elena looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the armor she wore so carefully. "You barely know me, Marcus. You don't know what you're saying. I know enough. I know. You're kind, because I've watched the way you talked to Rita, the way you smiled at that kid selling newspapers outside the flower shop. I know you're strong, because whatever you're running from hasn't broken you, and I know I want to keep learning more." She did not pull her hand away. Instead, she intertwined her fingers with his, a gesture so small and so significant that Marcus felt his heart expand in his chest. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "Being close to me is dangerous." "I'm not afraid." "You should be." But even as she said it, she did not let go of his hand. And when they left the restaurant later that night, walking through streets still damp from the morning rain, she let him put his arm around her shoulders. She let herself lean into his warmth. She let herself for just a moment believe that maybe she could have something normal, something good, something that was not defined by her father's shadow. They stood outside her apartment building, neither one wanting the night to end. The laundromat below was dark and quiet, its neon sign flickering weakly. "Can I see you tomorrow?" Marcus asked. Eleanor looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw a battle being waged, fear against hope, past against present. Hope won, at least for tonight. "Yes," she said, "tomorrow." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek, her lips warm against his skin. Then she disappeared into the building, and Marcus walked home through the sleeping city, not knowing that from a black car parked across the street, two men with cold eyes watched him go. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of small moments that felt enormous to both of them. Marcus and Elena met every morning at the diner, every evening at some small restaurant or quiet park. They walked along the lakefront as autumn painted the trees in shades of fire. They talked about everything and nothing, building a bridge between two worlds that had never been meant to meet. Eleanor began to let her guard down piece by piece. She told Marcus about her mother, about the way she used to sing while cooking Sunday dinner, about the garden she had tended with such care. She told him about her childhood dreams of becoming a teacher, of filling a classroom with books and curiosity. She did not tell him about her father, not the truth of it, but she told him enough that he understood something dark lurked in her past. Marcus did not push. He simply showed up, day after day, consistent and patient. He brought her flowers from a shop across town, because he knew she would not want flowers from the place where she worked. He fixed the leak in her kitchen sink without being asked. He held her hand during a movie when a scene made her flinch, never asking why. One night, 3 weeks after they met, Elena made a decision. She invited Marcus up to her apartment for the first time, a small space with a window that looked out onto the alley, but filled with touches that made it feel like a home. Plants on the windowsill, photographs of places she dreamed of visiting, a worn copy of her mother's favorite book on the nightstand. They sat on her small couch, drinking tea, and Elena finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why me, Marcus? There must be dozens of women who would be easier. Women with normal lives, normal families, normal problems. Why do you keep showing up for me?" He set down his cup and turned to face her. "Because easy isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking for real. I'm looking for someone who sees the world clearly, who's been knocked down and got back up, who knows that love isn't a fairy tale but chooses to believe in it anyway." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're the most real person I've ever met, Elena, and I think if you let me, I could make you happy." Tears welled in her eyes, the first tears she had allowed herself to cry in years. "You don't know who I am, what I come from." "Then tell me." She looked at him, this man who had walked into her life like an answer to a prayer she had stopped saying. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to unburden herself of the weight she had been carrying alone for so long, but fear held her tongue. "Not yet," she said, "but soon. I promise." He accepted that, because he had learned that patience was its own form of love. They sat together on that small couch, and Elena rested her head on his shoulder, and outside the window, the city hummed, with secrets neither of them could yet understand. But time was running out. Across the city, Victor Castellano had made a decision. He had watched his daughter fall in love with the carpenter, had seen the way she smiled now, the way the sadness was slowly lifting from her eyes. Part of him was glad. Part of him wanted nothing more than her happiness. But another part, the part that had survived decades in a world without mercy, knew that love made people vulnerable. And vulnerability was something he could not afford. He called his most trusted lieutenant, a man named Anthony, who had been with him since the beginning. "Bring the carpenter to me," Victor said. "It's time we had a conversation." Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. If you want to follow emotional stories that touch the heart and stay with you long after they end, you need to be here. One click, and you will never miss a journey like this again. The morning Marcus Cole was taken, the sky over Chicago was clear and cold, the kind of autumn morning that made everything feel sharp and new. He had just finished his coffee at the diner, had kissed Eleanor goodbye outside the flower shop, had promised to pick her up at 7 for dinner at their favorite spot. He was thinking about the future, about how quickly she had become the center of his world, about what it might be like to build a life with her. He did not see the black car following him until it was too late. They took him quietly, efficiently, in a way that suggested they had done this many times before. One moment he was walking toward his truck, and the next, strong hands were guiding him into the back seat of a vehicle with tinted windows. No one on the street seemed to notice. No one called for help. It happened in broad daylight, and the world simply continued on, indifferent to one man's disappearance. Marcus did not panic. He had grown up in a neighborhood where violence was a daily reality, had learned early that fear was useless unless it sharpened you. He took in his surroundings with calm eyes, noting the two men in the front seat, the expensive leather interior, the fact that no one had hurt him yet. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice steady. The driver, a thick-necked man with a scar on his chin, did not respond. The man beside him, older and more refined, glanced back through the rearview mirror. "Somewhere you can have a conversation," he said. "Just relax, Mr. Cole. No one's going to hurt you yet." They drove for 20 minutes, leaving the city behind and entering a neighborhood Marcus had only seen in photographs. The houses here were estates, vast properties hidden behind gates and hedges, a world away from the south side where he had grown up. They turned into a driveway that seemed to go on forever, past manicured gardens and fountains that sprayed water into the cold air. The house at the end of the driveway was enormous, a mansion of stone and glass that looked like it belonged in another century. Marcus was led inside by men who moved with military precision, through hallways lined with paintings that probably cost more than he would earn in a lifetime, into a study where a fire crackled in a marble fireplace. Victor Castellano was waiting for him. Marcus had never seen this man before, but he recognized power when he saw it. Victor sat in a leather chair, his silver hair perfectly combed, his suit impeccable, his eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that could have melted steel. Everything about him radiated control, from the way he held his glass of whiskey to the casual arrangement of his limbs. This was a man who had never had to raise his voice to get what he wanted. "Mr. Cole," Victor said, gesturing to a chair across from him. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Marcus sat, not because he was told to, but because standing felt like a weakness. "Who are you?" "My name is Victor Castellano. I believe you've been spending quite a lot of time with my daughter." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Eleanor's father, the man she never talked about, the man whose shadow seemed to follow her everywhere she went. He was here, in this room, looking at Marcus like he was deciding whether to shake his hand or end his life. "Elena never mentioned you were wealthy, powerful, dangerous." Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No, I don't suppose she did. My daughter has many talents, but honesty about her origins is not one of them." "What do you want?" Victor studied him for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "What do I want? I want what every father wants, Mr. Cole. I want my daughter to be happy. I want her to be safe. I want her to have a future that doesn't require her to work in a flower shop and live above a laundromat." He leaned forward, his eyes hardening. "What I don't want is for some carpenter from the south side to stumble into her life and destroy everything I've built. I would never hurt Elena. Perhaps not intentionally, but you see, Mr. Cole, you are a problem. You have no power, no resources, no ability to protect her from the world she was born into. You are a liability, and in my line of work, liabilities have a way of becoming casualties." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. "What exactly is your line of work?" Victor laughed, a cold sound that echoed in the vast room. "You know exactly what my line of work is. You've heard the name Castellano. You know what it means in this city. Don't play ignorant with me." He was right. Marcus had heard the name. had heard the whispers about the family that controlled half the illegal activity in Chicago. He had just never connected it to Elena, to the woman with autumn eyes who cried over sad movies and loved the smell of fresh flowers. Elena walked away from all of this, Marcus said. She doesn't want anything to do with your world. What my daughter wants, and what she can have, are two different things. She was born into this family, Mr. Cole. That is not something she can simply walk away from, no matter how far she runs or how many small lives she tries to build. Victor set down his glass and stood, walking to the window that overlooked the grounds. I have watched over her for 4 years. I have ensured her safety, her employment, her housing. Everything she has because I have allowed it. She doesn't know that. No, and you will not tell her. Victor turned to face him, his expression unreadable. Here is what is going to happen, Mr. Cole. You are going to leave my daughter. You are going to disappear from her life, and you are never going to contact her again. In return, I will allow you to continue your simple existence without interference. And if I refuse? Victor smiled, and this time there was something almost like respect in his eyes. Then I will make your life very difficult. I will ensure that no one in this city hires you. I will destroy your credit, your reputation, your ability to exist in any meaningful way. And if that doesn't work... He let the threat hang in the air, unspoken, but perfectly clear. Marcus stood, his hands clenched at his sides. You can threaten me all you want. But Elena isn't your property. She gets to choose who she loves, and she chose me. She chose you because she doesn't know who she is. She's playing pretend, Mr. Cole. She's living a fantasy where she gets to be normal, where her last name doesn't mean anything, but reality has a way of intruding on fantasies. Victor walked toward him, stopping close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. I am offering you a chance to walk away clean. Take it. For a long moment, the two men stood facing each other, power against principle, fear against love. Then Marcus shook his head. No. Victor's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his controlled facade. Excuse me? I said no, I love your daughter. I don't care who her father is or what you do or how much money you have. Elena makes me happy, and I think I make her happy. That's enough for me. He stepped closer, refusing to back down. So do whatever you need to do. Destroy my career, ruin my credit, send your men after me. I don't care. I'm not leaving her. Victor stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. The coldness did not disappear, but it was joined by something else, something that might have been curiosity. You're either very brave or very stupid, Mr. Cole. Probably both. Another long silence. Then Victor walked back to his chair and sat down, picking up his whiskey glass. My daughter thinks she knows who I am. She thinks I am a monster, someone whose soul is so black that even love cannot redeem it. She left me because she couldn't accept the truth of what I've done. He took a sip, his eyes distant. But what she doesn't understand is that everything I've done, every terrible choice I've made, I made it for her. For her mother before she passed, for the family that is the only thing that matters in this world. Maybe she would understand if you talked to her. Victor laughed bitterly. I've tried. She won't see me. She won't take my calls. She has erased me from her life as if I never existed. He looked at Marcus, and for the first time, the older man looked almost human. But you she trusts. You she has let into her heart. Marcus felt the conversation shifting, moving into territory he had not expected. What are you saying? I'm saying that perhaps you can be useful to me, Mr. Cole. Perhaps you can help me reach my daughter in a way I cannot. Victor leaned forward, his eyes intense. I'm not asking you to spy on her or betray her trust. I'm asking you to be there for her, to protect her, and when the time is right, to help her understand that her father is not the villain she believes him to be. And in return? In return, I will not interfere with your relationship. I will allow you to love her without obstacle, and when the day comes that danger finds her, because in my world, Danger always finds you. I will be there to help keep her safe. Marcus did not trust this man. Every instinct told him that Victor Castellano was manipulating him, using him as a pawn in a game whose rules he did not understand. But he also knew that walking away from this conversation meant walking away from Elena. And that was something he could not do. I won't lie to her, he said finally. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to be patient, to earn her trust, to love her, and to help her see that the world is not as simple as she wants it to be. Victor extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Marcus looked at the hand, at the man who had threatened his life just minutes before. He thought about Elena, about her smile, about the way she had started to open up. To him, flower by flower, layer by layer. He thought about what it would mean to walk away, to never see her again. He shook Victor's hand. We have an agreement. But understand this, Elena comes first. Always. If you do anything that hurts her, I don't care how powerful you are, I will find a way to stop you. Victor smiled, and this time there was something almost like admiration in his eyes. I believe you would try. That's why I chose not to have you removed. Marcus was driven back to the city in the same black car, his mind racing with everything that had just happened. He had met Elena's father. He had learned the truth about her family, and he had agreed to something that felt uncomfortably like a deal with the devil. But as the skyline of Chicago rose before him, he made himself a promise. Whatever happened, whatever secrets he now carried, he would protect Elena. He would love her honestly and completely, and when the time came to tell her the truth, he would face the consequences together with her. That evening he picked her up at 7 as promised. She was wearing a yellow dress that made her look like a piece of sunlight, and when she smiled at him, everything else faded away. You look beautiful, he said. You're late. But she was teasing, her eyes warm. Sorry, got held up at work. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but he pushed it down. There would be time for truth later. Right now, he just wanted to be with her, to hold her hand across the table, to pretend that the world outside did not exist. They went to Giovanni's, their favorite table by the window. The pasta was perfect, the wine was good, and Elena talked about her day at the flower shop with such enthusiasm that Marcus found himself falling in love with her all over again. Mrs. Chen says I have a gift for arrangements, she said, twirling spaghetti around her fork. She wants me to do the centerpieces for a wedding next month. That's amazing. You should be proud. She looked at him, her eyes soft in the candlelight. I never thought I could be proud of something so simple. After everything, I thought pride was reserved for big achievements, important things. But making something beautiful with flowers, it feels more real than anything I've ever done. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Simple things are important things. That's what my grandmother used to say. The big stuff is just decoration. It's the everyday moments that build a life. Elena squeezed his hand, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. How did I get so lucky to find you? I ask myself the same thing every day. They finished dinner and walked along the lakefront, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. Elena leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. The world felt peaceful, suspended in amber, a moment outside of time. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Marcus felt his heart clench. You can tell me anything. My father, the reason I don't talk about him. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. He's not a good man, Marcus. He's done terrible things. Things I can't forgive, things I've spent 4 years trying to forget. Whatever he's done, it doesn't change who you are. But it does, don't you see? I'm his daughter. His blood runs in my veins. Every time I look in the mirror, I see his eyes looking back at me. Her voice cracked. I'm so afraid that whatever darkness is in him is in me, too. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. He took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. You are not your father. You are Eleanor, the woman who works 6 days a week at a flower shop because she loves creating beauty. The woman who feeds the stray cats in the alley behind her building. The woman who cries at sad movies and laughs at her own jokes and makes the best coffee I've ever tasted. He leaned in, his forehead touching hers. Whatever your father has done, it has nothing to do with who you are. You have already proven that by walking away, by building your own life. That took more courage than most people have in their entire bodies. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she was smiling. You really believe that? With everything I am. She kissed him then, and it was different from all the kisses that had come before. This one was surrender and acceptance, fear and hope tangled together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But the challenges were closer than he knew. That night, as Elena slept in her apartment and Marcus drove home through empty streets, a meeting was taking place in a warehouse on the west side of the city. A man named Roberto Salvatore, who had been Victor Castellano's rival for over a decade, was looking at photographs of Elena. The Castellano girl, Roberto said, his voice like gravel, living like a peasant when she should be a princess. Her father must be going soft in his old age. She could be leverage, said the man beside him, a thin figure with nervous eyes. If we take her, Victor will burn this city to the ground. Roberto smiled, but there was no humor in it. No, we need to be smarter than that. We need to find another way into the Castellano operation. He tapped the photograph. This carpenter she's seeing. What do we know about him? Nothing. He's nobody. Just a working man from the south side. Nobody is nobody. Everyone has something they care about, something they'll do anything to protect. Roberto leaned back in his chair. Find out everything about Marcus Cole, where he lives, where he works, who he loves. Then we'll see if he can be of use to us. The wheels were turning, forces were aligning, and two worlds that had never been meant to collide were hurtling toward each other with the inevitability of a storm. Marcus and Elena, lost in their own small happiness, did not see it coming, but it was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Elena's life. She and Marcus fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing, as inevitable as the turning of the seasons. He came to the flower shop every afternoon to walk her home. She cooked dinner for him in her small apartment, filling the space with laughter and the smell of her mother's recipes. They talked about dreams and fears and everything in between, building something that felt solid and real. One evening, Marcus took her to meet the men he worked with at the construction site. They were rough men, hard-working and honest, and they welcomed Elena with warmth that surprised her. They made jokes at Marcus's expense, teased him about finally finding a woman willing to put up with him, and one of them, an older man named Joe, pulled her aside when Marcus wasn't looking. That boy's been alone too long, Joe said. Good to see him with someone who makes him smile like that. He makes me smile too, Elena admitted. Then hold on to each other. World's got a way of trying to pull people apart. Don't let it. Elena thought about those words as she watched Marcus laughing with his friends, the late afternoon sun catching the dust in the air. She thought about all the ways the world had tried to pull her apart, all the reasons she should have closed herself off forever. But here she was, open and vulnerable, and it was terrifying and wonderful all at once. That night, lying beside Marcus in her narrow bed, she asked him a question she had been afraid to voice. Do you ever think about the future? He turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. All the time. What do you see? He was quiet for a moment, considering. I see a house. Something I built with my own hands. A yard with a garden, maybe a swing set. I see Sunday dinners and road trips and watching our kids grow up. He reached out and touched her. Cheek, I see you. In every version of the future I can imagine, I see you. Eleanor felt tears pricking at her eyes. What if I can't give you that? What if my past catches up with me, ruins everything we're building? Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes, Elena, I'm not going anywhere. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in something good. But across the city, Danger was gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. Roberto Salvatore had done his research. He knew everything about Marcus Cole, from his grandmother's death to the jobs he had worked to the woman he was falling in love with. He knew about the meeting with Victor Castellano, knew that Marcus had walked away alive, which meant Victor was using him somehow. "The carpenter is our way in," Roberto said to his lieutenants. "If we control him, we control access to the girl. And if we control the girl, Victor will do anything we ask." The plan was simple and brutal. They would approach Marcus, offer him money to feed them information about Elena and her father's organization. If he refused, and Roberto expected he would refuse, they would threaten him. And if threats didn't work, they would take someone he loved. "Everyone has a breaking point," Roberto said, "even good men." A few days later, Marcus was working late at the construction site when a car pulled up. Two men got out, well-dressed and smiling in a way that made Marcus's instincts flare. "Mr. Cole, my employer would like a word." Marcus set down his tools, his body tensing. "Who's your employer?" "Someone who has a proposition for you. Don't worry, this won't take long." He could have refused. He could have walked away, called Elena, called Victor even. But something in the men's eyes told him that refusing would only delay the inevitable. Better to face whatever this was head-on. They drove him to a restaurant downtown, closed for a private event. Roberto. Salvatore was waiting at a table, surrounded by men who looked like they knew how to hurt people and enjoyed it. "Mr. Cole," Roberto said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming. I don't think I had a choice." "We all have choices. Some are just easier than others." Roberto poured 2 glasses of wine, pushing one toward Marcus. "I understand you're seeing Victor Castellano's daughter. Beautiful girl. Too good for a man like you, if you don't mind me saying." "What do you want?" "Straight to business, I appreciate that." Roberto leaned back, swirling his wine. "I want information, anything you can learn about Victor's operations, his people, his weaknesses. In return, I'll make you a wealthy man. Wealthy enough to give Elena the life she deserves, rather than this blue-collar fantasy you're playing at." Marcus felt cold anger spreading through his chest. "I don't know anything about Victor's business." "Perhaps not yet, but you will. As you get closer to the daughter, doors will open. People will talk, and when they do, you'll report to me." "And if I refuse?" Roberto's smile vanished. "Then I'll have to find other ways to motivate you, perhaps starting with that pretty flower shop where Elena works. It would be a shame if something happened to it, or to Mrs. Chen, or to anyone else Elena cares about." Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "If you touch anyone she loves—" "Sit down, Mr. Cole." Roberto's voice was ice. "I'm not threatening. I'm explaining. This is how our world works. People like you wander into it by accident, thinking love will protect you. But love is a weakness, and weaknesses can be exploited." He stood as well, adjusting his jacket. "You have 1 week to make your decision. Choose wisely." Marcus was escorted out to the street, his mind reeling. He had known Elena's world was dangerous. He had known her father was powerful. But he had not understood just how deep the darkness went. How many predators lurked in shadows he couldn't see. He did not go home that night. Instead, he walked the streets until dawn, thinking about Elena, about the future they were building, about the impossible choice he now faced. When the sun rose over Lake Michigan, painting the water in shades of gold, he made his decision. He would tell Elena everything. No more secrets, no more lies. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, just as he had promised. That afternoon, he found her at the flower shop, arranging roses with careful hands. She looked up when he entered, and her smile faltered at the expression on his face. "Marcus, what's wrong? We need to talk. Not here. Can you get away?" She nodded, worry clouding her eyes, and told Mrs. Chen she needed to leave early. They walked to the lakefront, to a bench where they had sat so many times before, watching the waves and dreaming about the future. "You're scaring me," Elena said. "I know. I'm scared too." He took a deep breath. "There are things I need to tell you, things I should have told you from the beginning." And so he told her everything, about Victor's men taking him to the mansion, about the conversation with her father, the deal they had made, about Roberto Salvatore's threats just the night before. He told her without excuses, without trying to make himself look better. He laid every truth at her feet and waited for her judgment. When he finished, Elena was silent for a long time. The wind off the lake was cold and she wrapped her arms around herself, her face unreadable. "My father," she said finally. "You met my father." "Yes. And you didn't tell me." "I wanted to. Every single day I wanted to. But I didn't know how. And I was afraid of losing you." "You made a deal with him. You agreed to help him reach me." "I agreed to love you and protect you. That's all I've ever done, Elena. That's all I wanted to do." She turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with tears. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have everyone around you keeping secrets? My whole life has been secrets. My father's business, my mother's illness, the truth about where our money came from, and now you too. I'm not like them. I'm telling you now everything, because I can't stand lying to you anymore, because you deserve the truth even if it costs me everything. It might. This might cost you everything." Her voice broke. "I don't know if I can trust you." Marcus felt his heart shatter in his chest, but he did not look away. "I understand, and I won't blame you if you walk away. But I need you to know that everything I felt, everything I feel, is real. Loving you was never part of any deal. It just happened, like breathing, like waking up in the morning. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that if you let me." The silence stretched between them, filled with pain and hope and the sound of waves against the shore. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time. I need to think." "Take all the time you need. I'll be waiting." She stood up without looking at him and walked away along the lakefront, a small figure against the endless grey of the water. Marcus watched her until she disappeared, then dropped his head into his hands and let the grief wash over him. If you have ever felt what Marcus feels right now, the fear of losing someone you love because of the secrets you carried, leave a comment, saying, "The truth hurts, but lies hurt more." I want to know how many people here understand this moment. 3 days passed without a word from Eleanor. Marcus went through the motions of living, waking and working and eating without tasting anything. He did not call her, did not go to the flower shop, did not show up at the diner. He had promised her time, and he would keep that promise even if it destroyed him. On the 4th morning, there was a knock at his door. Elena stood in the hallway, her face pale but determined, her hands clasped in front of her like a shield. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, and Marcus wanted nothing more than to pull her into his arms and never let go. "Can I come in?" she asked. He stepped aside without a word, and she entered his apartment, looking around at the space she had never seen before. The furniture he had built, the photographs of his grandmother, the small touches that made a house a home. "You made all of this?" she said quietly. "Most of it. My grandmother always said a man who can build with his hands can build anything." Eleanor ran her fingers along the edge of a bookshelf, her expression unreadable. Finally, she turned to face him. "I spent 3 days thinking about everything you told me. About my father, about Roberto Salvatore, about the lies and the truth and all the impossible choices." She took a deep breath. "And then I realized something." "What?" "That you did exactly what I would have done. If someone had offered me a chance to protect someone I loved, even if it meant making deals with darkness, I would have done it too." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. "My father terrifies me. He represents everything I ran away from. But you walked into his world and walked out again, all because you refused to leave me. I told you I wouldn't. I know, and that's why I'm here." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling. "I don't know what's going to happen next. Roberto Salvatore is dangerous, and my father is dangerous, and being with me might be the most dangerous thing you've ever done. But I can't walk away from you. I've tried so hard, and I can't." Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. "I've got you. Whatever comes, I've got you." They stood there for a long time, two people clinging to each other against a world that wanted to tear them apart. When they finally pulled apart, Elena looked at him with new resolve in her eyes. "If we're going to survive this, we need to be smart. Roberto won't wait forever, and my father, I need to talk to him." "Are you sure?" "No, but I can't keep running from my own past. If there's any chance of him helping us without making things worse, I need to try." She squared her shoulders. "Will you come with me?" Marcus thought about the mansion, about Victor Castellanos' cold eyes and veiled threats, but he thought also about Elena, about the courage it took for her to walk back into a world she had fled. If she could face her demons, he could face them beside her. "Always," he said. They drove to Lakeshore Drive that afternoon, to the mansion that Elena had not seen in 4 years. The gates opened at their approach as if they had been expected, and security guards waved them through with expressions that betrayed nothing. The house was exactly as Elena remembered it, grand and cold and filled with memories she had spent years trying to forget. She stood in the entrance hall, her hand in Marcus's, and felt like a ghost returning to haunt her own life. Victor was waiting for them in the study. He rose when they entered, his eyes moving from his daughter's face to their joined hands. Something flickered across his expression, too fast to identify. "Eleanor," he said, "you came." "I didn't have much choice." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could feel her trembling. "Roberto Salvatore threatened Marcus. He's trying to use us to get to you." Victor's expression darkened. "I'm aware. My people intercepted one of his men this morning. We've been monitoring the situation." "Then you know we're in danger." "You've always been in danger. You simply chose to pretend otherwise." Victor gestured to the chairs. "Sit, both of you. We have much to discuss." The conversation that followed was nothing like Marcus had expected. Victor did not lecture or threaten. Instead, he listened as Elena explained everything that had happened, everything Marcus had told her. His face remained impassive, but Marcus noticed the way his hands tightened on the arms of his chair, the flash of something like fear in his eyes when Elena described Roberto's threats. When she finished, Victor was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Marcus. "You told her the truth, even knowing it might cost you everything." "She deserved to know." "Yes, she did." Victor stood and walked to the window, his back to them. "I have spent 25 years building an empire. I have made decisions that haunt me, done things that cannot be undone. But everything has been for my family. For Elena's mother when she was alive. For Elena herself." "That doesn't justify," Elena began. "I'm not asking you to justify anything. I'm asking you to understand." He turned to face them, and for the first time, Marcus saw the weariness beneath the power. "I cannot undo who I am or what I've done, but I can protect you. I can ensure that Roberto Salvatore never touches you or anyone you love." "At what cost?" "At whatever cost is necessary." Victor's voice was firm. "Roberto has been a thorn in my side for years. Perhaps it's time I removed him permanently." "You mean—" Eleanor could not finish the sentence. "I mean nothing that concerns you. I only mean that you will be safe. Both of you." He looked at Marcus. "I underestimated you, Mr. Cole. I thought you were a simple man playing at something beyond your understanding, but you've proven yourself loyal and honest, qualities that are rare in my world." "I don't want your approval," Marcus said. "I just want Elena to be safe." "Then we want the same thing." Victor crossed to his desk and picked up a phone. "My men will escort you home. From now on you'll have protection. You won't see them, but they'll be there. And Mr. Cole—" "Yes?" "Welcome to the family." There was no warmth in the words, but there was something else. Something that might have been acceptance, for better or worse. They left the mansion as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Elena was quiet during the drive, processing everything that had happened. Marcus did not push. He simply held her hand and let the silence speak for itself. When they reached her apartment, Eleanor finally spoke. "I never thought I'd go back there. I never thought I'd see him again." "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Angry, sad, relieved. All of it at once." She looked at him. "But one thing I know for certain. I'm glad you were there. I'm glad I didn't have to face him alone. You'll never have to face anything alone again. I promise." She kissed him then, a kiss that tasted like tears and hope, like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But the storm was not over yet. That night, while Marcus and Elena slept in each other's arms, Roberto Salvatore received a message. Victor Castellano had declared war. The game they had been playing for years was about to reach its violent conclusion. Roberto looked at the message and smiled. "Finally," he said. "Let's see who survives." The war began quietly, with moves and counter-moves that the average citizen of Chicago would never notice. But in the underworld that Victor Castellano and Roberto Salvatore inhabited, everyone felt the shift. Alliances were tested, loyalties were questioned, and in the shadows, men, prepared for a conflict that had been brewing for over a decade. Marcus learned about the war in fragments, pieces of information that Elena shared with him after her conversations with her father. Victor had mobilized his entire organization, moving resources and personnel like chess pieces on a board. Roberto responded in kind, his men probing for weaknesses, looking for any advantage they could find. For 3 weeks, the tension mounted. Marcus continued to work, continued to meet Elena at the flower shop, continued to pretend that life was normal, even as everything around them changed. The security detail Victor had promised was invisible but present. Marcus occasionally caught glimpses of unfamiliar cars parked on his street, of men who watched without appearing to watch. Eleanor threw herself into her work, arranging flowers with an intensity that Mrs. Chen found both impressive and concerning. The wedding centerpieces she had been hired to create became her obsession, each arrangement a small act of rebellion against the chaos closing in around her. "You're going to work yourself into the ground," Marcus told her one evening as she showed him the designs. "Work keeps me sane. If I stop, if I think too much about what's happening..." She trailed off, her hands still. "I know, but you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we're in it together." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Roberto to make his move, for everything to fall apart. Maybe it won't. Maybe your father will end this before it gets worse. You don't know my father. He doesn't end things quietly. He makes examples." The example came sooner than anyone expected. On a cold night in late November, Roberto Salvatore's primary warehouse caught fire. It burned for 6 hours, consuming millions of dollars in merchandise and destroying evidence of operations that had been running for years. No one died. Victor had made sure of that. But the message was clear. Roberto's response was immediate and brutal. 2 days later, Elena received a package at the flower shop. Mrs. Chen brought it to her, a small box wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Elena's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph of Marcus, taken without his knowledge, walking to his truck after work. On the back, written in neat handwriting, "Ask your father what happens next." Elena called Marcus immediately, her voice tight with fear. He came to the shop within minutes and they called Victor together. The conversation was tense, Elena demanding answers while Victor remained frustratingly calm. "Roberto is testing us," Victor said through the phone. "He wants to see how we react, whether we panic. He threatened Marcus. He's threatening everyone. It's what he does." Victor's voice hardened. But threatening is all he can do now. His resources are depleted. His men are abandoning him. This war is almost over. Almost isn't. Over. Until it's finished, Marcus is in danger. I'm in danger. You have my protection, both of you. Nothing will happen. Your protection didn't stop someone from taking that photograph. There was a long pause. When Victor spoke again, his voice was different, stripped of its usual confidence. I will end this. Within the week, Roberto Salvatore will no longer be a threat to anyone. I give you my word." The line went dead, and Elena and Marcus looked at each other. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say. Victor kept his word, though the details of how remained hidden. 5 days later, news spread through Chicago that Roberto Salvatore had disappeared. His organization crumbled almost overnight, his men scattering to the winds or pledging allegiance to other powers. Some whispered that Roberto had fled the country. Others said he would never be found, that he had simply ceased to exist. The truth, known only to Victor and his closest lieutenants, was somewhere in between. But what mattered was that the war was over, and Elena and Marcus were safe. They did not celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate when safety came at such a cost, bought with violence and power that Elena had spent years trying to escape. But they were alive, and they were together, and slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild the life that had been interrupted. The days lengthened into December. Snow fell on the city, softening the hard edges and making everything look fresh and new. Marcus finished the renovation he had been working on and started a new project, a home for a young couple expecting their first child. Elena delivered the wedding centerpieces to universal praise and received more requests than she could handle. One evening, as they walked along the lakefront watching the snow fall on the dark water, Marcus stopped and turned to face her. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About the future. About us." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. "I know we've only been together a few months. I know we've been through things that most people never face, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Every morning, every evening, every moment in between." He opened the box to reveal a simple ring, a small diamond set in a band of silver. It was not expensive, not the kind of ring a Castellano daughter would have been expected to receive, but it was beautiful, and it was real, and it was his. "Elena Castellano," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart, "will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. The snow hung suspended in the air, the waves frozen mid-crest, the lights of the city holding their breath. Elena looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, this carpenter from the south side who had walked into her life and refused to leave. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her. As the snow began to fall again, white flakes landing on their hair and shoulders, blessing them with the kind of peace that only winter can bring. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not her father's empire, not the violence that had preceded this calm, not the complicated truth of who she was and where she came from. There was only Marcus and Elena, and the future stretching out before them like an unwritten page. The wedding took place on a warm day in June, 6 months after Marcus had knelt in the snow and asked Elena to be his wife. They chose a small venue, a garden in the suburbs where flowers grew wild, and the air smelled like honeysuckle and possibility. 50 guests attended, friends from the construction site, regulars from the diner, Mrs. Chen and her husband, a handful of others who had become part of the small family Marcus and Elena had built together. Victor Castellano was not invited. Elena had wrestled with the decision for weeks, knowing that excluding her, father would send a message she could never take back. But in the end, she decided that this day belonged to her and Marcus, to the life they were building together, not to the shadows of her past. Still, as she walked down the aisle on the arm of Joe, the older man from the construction site who had become a father figure to her, Eleanor thought she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure at the edge of the garden. Silver hair, dark suit, standing apart from the crowd. When she looked again, he was gone. She told herself she had imagined it, but part of her wondered if her father was there after all, watching from a distance, unable to stay away even when he had not been invited. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Marcus wore a blue suit that made his eyes shine, and he cried when he saw Elena in her dress, a flowing white gown that Mrs. Chen had helped her choose. They wrote their own vows, promises that spoke of everything they had survived and everything they hoped to become. "I vow to build with you," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just houses and furniture, but a life, a family, a home that no storm can destroy." "I vow to bloom with you," Elena replied, tears streaming down her face. "To face every season, every challenge, every joy with you by my side. To be your partner and your best friend until the end of my days." They exchanged rings and sealed their promises with a kiss, and the small crowd erupted in cheers. Rita from the diner wiped her eyes with a napkin. Mrs. Chen clutched her husband's arm and smiled. Joe raised a glass and shouted something that made everyone laugh. The reception lasted until the stars came out, dancing and eating and celebrating in a way that felt both wild and sacred. Marcus and Elena moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations and well wishes, never straying far from each other's side. As the night wound down and the last guests departed, they stood together at the edge of the garden, looking up at the sky. "We did it," Elena said, her voice full of wonder. "We actually did it." "This is just the beginning," Marcus replied, pulling her close. "We've got the rest of our lives to figure out what comes next. Any ideas?" He thought for a moment. "I want to build us a house. Something small with a yard and a garden, maybe a room for a nursery someday." Elena smiled, the kind of smile that transformed her entire face. "I'd like that." They left the garden hand in hand and drove through the sleeping city to their new apartment, larger than the one above the laundromat, with windows that looked out onto a park where children played on summer afternoons. It was the first place that had ever felt like theirs, like home. The months that followed were ordinary in the best possible way. Marcus started building their house on a plot of land outside the city, spending weekends framing walls and installing windows. Eleanor continued at the flower shop, her reputation growing until she had more clients than she could handle. They cooked dinner together, argued about what to watch on television, fell asleep tangled in each other's arms, and slowly, tentatively, Elena began to repair her relationship with her father. It started with a letter delivered by one of Victor's men to the flower shop. Eleanor almost threw it away without reading it, but something stopped her, and she found herself tearing open the envelope and unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. The letter was short, written in her father's careful hand. It did not ask for forgiveness or make excuses. It simply said that he was proud of her, that he hoped she would be happy, and that the door would always be open if she ever wanted to come home. Eleanor cried when she read it, tears she had been holding back for years, and that evening she called the number at the bottom of the page and left a message asking her father to meet her for coffee. They met at a small cafe, neutral ground where neither held the advantage. The conversation was awkward at first, two people who had loved each other fiercely and hurt each other deeply, trying to find their way back to something real. "I'm not asking you to forget what I've done," Victor said. "I'm asking you to understand that it came from love. Twisted, yes. Wrong, perhaps, but love nonetheless." "I know," Eleanor replied. "I've always known. That's what made it so hard." They talked for hours, about Eleanor's mother, and the years they had lost, and the future. That might still be possible. By the time they parted, nothing had been solved, but something had shifted. A crack had opened in the wall between them, letting in a sliver of light. 1 year after the wedding, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She told Marcus on a Sunday morning, while he was making pancakes in the kitchen of the house he had built. He dropped the spatula, flour dusting the front of his shirt, and stared at her with an expression of pure, unguarded joy. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I took 3 tests, all positive." He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. They spent the rest of the day in a daze, talking about nurseries and names and all the ways their lives were about to change. Victor received the news with characteristic restraint, but Elena saw the tears in his eyes, quickly blinked away. "A grandchild," he said. "I never thought I would live to see it." "You will," Elena said. "You'll be there for all of it. If you..." Want to be. He took her hand the first time he had touched her in years. I want to be, more than anything. The baby was born on a cold night in February, a little girl with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Maria, after Elena's mother, and from the moment she drew her first breath, she became the center of their universe. Marcus held his daughter in the hospital room, marveling at how small she was, how perfect. Elena watched them from the bed, exhausted but radiant, and felt something settle into place inside her. This was what she had been searching for all along, not escape from her past, but the courage to build a future, not the absence of darkness, but the presence of light strong enough to overcome it. 3 years later, they sat on the porch of their house watching Maria chase fireflies across the lawn. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the air smelled like summer and possibility. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" Eleanor asked. Marcus looked at her, at this woman who had transformed his life in ways he never could have imagined. "Every day," he said, "and every day I'm grateful." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "Me too." In the distance, Maria caught a firefly and held it up, its light glowing through her small fingers. She laughed, a sound like bells, and ran toward her parents to show them her prize. "Look!" she cried. "I caught a star." Marcus scooped her up and held her high, and she giggled with delight. Eleanor watched them, her heart so full it ached, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family, because that was what Marcus had built with his hands and his heart. That was what Eleanor had chosen when she walked out of the rain and into a diner on Ashland Avenue. Not just a house, not just a marriage, but a home. A place where broken people could become whole, where darkness gave way to dawn, where love was strong enough to survive anything. And in the end, that was all any of them had ever wanted. If you've watched this far, it's because this story touched something inside you. Leave a comment saying, "I've watched this far," so I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Your support means everything. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to believe in love again. Every like, every share, every comment helps this channel grow and helps more people find these stories. Finally, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. New stories are coming every week, stories about courage and love and the beautiful, messy miracle of being human. You won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for being here, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember, the greatest stories are the ones we choose to live.